I am Commissioner Mohammed. I'm here with Commissioner Helen Gerhardt, and I'm here to preside over issues related to religious discrimination today. This morning I am joined by Nadia Khawaja. Ms. Khawaja is a former outreach coordinator with the Muslim Association of Greater Pittsburgh. Isra Barakat. Ms. Barakat is an Iraqi immigrant and a Muslim youth leader in the area. Sister Sarah Jamila. Ms. Jamila is an author of The History of the First Muslim Mosque, and today is representing the Muslim Women's Association of Pittsburgh. And Ishfaq Ahmed is a member of the Council on American and Islamic Relations, the Pittsburgh chapter, and he's the leader of that. The Commission protects persons against discrimination because of one's religion, but it does not often receive complaints on the basis. We would like to learn more about unequal treatment faced by the religious communities and what we can do at the Commission to better address those issues. We would also like to hear about any changes or trends in light of the so-called Muslim travel ban created by the Trump administration and overturned by the courts. And today the speakers are going to kind of go through, if you look at why things are changing for religious communities, specifically for the Muslim one, rhetoric really has a lot to do with that. The history of the community in America has a lot to do with that. And so we're going to start out by going through history, going through what happened, the Muslim community in the history of America, the Muslim community in the history of Pittsburgh. And then we're going to talk about what are we seeing today and what are the newest trends and everything, and that'll kind of be the flow. Each speaker will be given 10 minutes to talk, just about, and there'll be an open session after. So first I'd like to introduce Nadia Khawaja, and she'll be our first speaker today, and go for it. Yeah.
Thank you for conducting these hearings on the policies and impacts of religious and ethnic intimidation. Thank you for inviting me here today, especially Commissioner Gerhardt and Commissioner Wessy, and providing the opportunity to provide more perspective for Muslims in this community in American history, understanding some American Muslim demographics and the issues being faced by the community. As many know, the Pittsburgh area is one of the least diverse in the nation, although there are many efforts, like this one, underway to attract a more diverse population to the region. I grew up in South Florida in the early 80s, where both the political and social climate differed dramatically than what we are experiencing today. Diversity was the norm at that time and place, and there was no choice but to learn and support each other's backgrounds and differences. In the current climate, the narrative our children is facing is quite different. I am the mother of an almost 7-year-old rising second grader and an almost 4-year-old rising preschooler. Children that look or sound different in this region stand out dramatically in contrast to the majority of the population. Many of us and most of our children have the same interests, play the same sports, root for the same teams, read the same books, watch the same movies, and are growing up here and attending the same schools. The narrative, however, that our children hear daily when they turn on the television or listen to the radio or browse the web marks them as the other, despite that they are just as American as anyone else. Through many outreach events and initiatives over the last few years, and having spoken to over a few thousand people, we have learned that there are many facts about American Muslims that should be shared to help provide context outside of the counter-narrative that we hear in the media, from our leaders, and in our communities. So Islam, Christianity, and Judaism have a shared history, the shared narratives, same teachings, and prophets. Muslims respect and honor the Bible, the Torah, as well as all the prophets of both religions, Adam, Noah, Moses, David, Jesus, and others. The founding fathers of this nation knew about Islam and spoke multiple times during the Constitutional Convention about Muslims being able to be elected into office at even the highest level, including the presidency. Denise Spellberg details these discussions in her book, Thomas Jefferson's Quran. The framers had knowledge of Islam, and Thomas Jefferson himself had studied the Quran and used tenets found within to argue cases in Virginia during that time. Many of the framers, including George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, were slave owners, and estimates indicate that 30 to 40% of the slave population were Muslim. Muslims have fought in the front lines of every battle on behalf of this country, from the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Civil War, and beyond till today. Muslims hold political office and participate in the military, as well as in local, state, and federal government as civil servants, and support the infrastructure and management of this nation at every level. There are 2 Muslims that are currently elected members of Congress, Andre Carson from Indiana and Keith Ellison from Minnesota. So, now going on to some current demographics about Muslims in this country. According to a March 2017 report from the Institute of Social Policy Understanding, they found that Muslims are the youngest faith-based population in the nation. They are the most ethnically and racially diverse. They don't have a majority group. That they're most likely to be foreign-born, that they have similar education levels to Christians in America, that Muslim women surpass Muslim men in education, that Muslim families compared to other faith groups are most likely to face bullying, that 1 in 4 Muslim bullying incidents involves a teacher, that Muslims are the most likely faith community to experience religious discrimination, that Muslim women, Arabs, Asians, and young people are the most likely to experience religious discrimination, and that Muslim women are the most likely to suffer and also take action post-election. Allah myself. The Pew Research Center in May 2017 estimates that Muslims comprise 1 to 2% of the population in the U.S. at about 3 to 6 million people. This is compared to the 1.6 billion Muslims around the world. Only 20% of the world's Muslim population are from Arab countries. So now domestically, 10% of the physicians in this country are Muslim. We have famous writers, comics, filmmakers, sports stars, celebrities, leaders that represent America and Islam in all levels of society and in all levels of government. American Muslims spend their days the same way the general American population does. According to a Pew Research Center portrait of American Muslims from 2011, we find that 75% of Americans recycle and 76% of American Muslims recycle. 58% of Americans watch an hour or more of TV at night, and 62% of American Muslims watch an hour or more of TV. 44% display the American flag versus 59% display the American flag. 48% regularly watch pro or college sports versus 47% regularly watch pro or college sports. So Muslims and American generally are spending our days the same way, doing the same things on a daily basis. According to the Brookings Institution in 2015, the majority of those who know Muslims, even if not well, have favorable views of Muslims. This holds across the political spectrum. For example, only 22% of Republicans who know no Muslims have favorable views, compared with 51% of Republicans who know some Muslims but not well, and 59% of those who know some Muslims well. So to know a Muslim is to like them, based on the research. Here are some facts, not stories, but verifiable statistics to provide the real story and background, not the counter-narrative that we hear and see in the media and in the rhetoric over the past few years. ISIS worldwide and to date has killed far more Muslims than any other population. In fact, the number of Christian refugees versus Muslim refugees in 2016 that came to the United States are very similar. 37,521 Christian refugees and 38,901 Muslim refugees. So the narrative you hear is different and incorrect. The U.S. vetting and background check process on refugees is one of the strictest in the world, far stricter than any nation in Europe. According to the Center for Research on Globalization, a Canadian think tank, they did an analysis where they tracked global terrorism from 1970 to 2012. They have a database that does this analysis. And based on their review of approximately 2,400 terrorist attacks on U.S. domestic soil, they found that 60 were carried out by Muslims. In other words, 2.5% of all terrorist attacks in the United States on U.S. soil between 1970 and 2012 were carried out by Muslims. Islams and Muslims condemn terrorism unequivocally. There are no ifs, ands, and buts about it. The religion teaches that killing even one soul is as if a person killed all of humanity. Despite this being a very basic tenet of our faith, Muslims are asked on a weekly and sometimes even daily basis to condemn terrorism. This is akin to asking a Christian to condemn the KKK, as if the KKK represents Christianity. Most recently, the Muslim clergy refused to grant Islamic burial rights to the perpetrators of the Manchester bombings based upon pure Islamic theology and practice. Additionally, in a letter to ISIS and Baghdadi and their compatriots that can be found on lettertobaghdadi.com, nearly 200 Muslim leaders and clergy worldwide highlight 24 main categories of points in Islam that ISIS and their counterparts completely violate and abuse. The worldwide Islamic community agrees that ISIS is not Islamic, nor are their actions in any way justifiable or based on religion. Given all of this, what does this mean in the context of ways to move past this rhetoric, promotion, and spreading of inaccurate information and hate and proliferation? We live in a world where the group Muslim Advocates cites that every minute, thousands of hours of video are uploaded to YouTube, and every day, an average of 58 million tweets and 4.7 billion pieces of content are shared on Facebook on a daily basis. That's a lot of information. People are now being trained to think and provide analysis of complex issues based on 30-second sound bites or a meme. This does a tremendous disservice to the general population because these bits of information only relate stories and not statistics and provide no context for the reader or the listener. What do we need to do to understand, and how do we move forward? American Muslims identify as Americans. This is our home, and for many of us, it always has been and always will be. That Muslims will not simply be run out of the country due to these racist, prejudiced, and ignorant policies and actions. That, for example, my choosing to wear a headscarf is a choice to help me grow in my spirituality and does not represent a political ideology, nor is it a slap to the way of our life in this country and nation. It actually personifies the beauty of diversity in our society. That Muslims are contributing members of society, volunteers, givers of charity, parents, teachers, and leaders in our community. That despite what we hear when we listen to the rhetoric that is being used to make us the other, that we know our intentions, that we do not cause fear or terror, that we do not oppress others, nor are we oppressed, nor do we love or condone any act of terrorism. That when, according to a major study conducted by the Council on American Islamic Relations, that our children are being bullied in various ways by not just other children, but also teachers and their administrators, and that we have to work to end this now. That those entrusted to promote a fair and peaceful educational environment must be committed in doing so across religious, ethnic, and gender lines. That we commit today and going forward that if we hear others spread falsehoods, that we check them and promote others to find the statistics, not the stories, that show a fuller picture that they may be aware of. That we commit to looking at others beyond their initial facade, and that when I walk around Pittsburgh with my 2 little girls and we are trying to enjoy a peaceful and lovely afternoon at the Science Center or the conservatory or at the park, that they don't only see me as a stereotype. That our faith, through the words of the Quran, clearly commands us that we were made into different nations and tribes so that we can learn from one another and compete in our good works and actions. That some Muslims behave the way they do because of Islam, and some Muslims behave the way they do in spite of Islam. That we can easily all break these barriers if we promote the basic universal tenets of caring for our neighbors, helping those in need, working on common efforts like sports and community events together, and creating opportunities to come together based on our similarities and our interests. And service and volunteerism are far more powerful than any diversity enriching or faith-based initiatives. That at the most basic level, we are all working hard to secure peaceful, healthy, and happy lives, however we define that for ourselves, our families, and our communities. That any pain in these communities causes pain to all, and that we all share in the pain because we share our humanity. That our common values of friendship, love, community, school, and our interests and how we spend our time will bring us together. We are different, but we are the same, and we should celebrate and learn from each other. That our children can grow up with the same sense of self-confidence in their heritage, faith, and belonging to this beautiful nation just as any other citizen of our country. Thank you for your time today and for this effort to begin to address these issues.
Thank you so much, Nadia.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ms. Khawaja. Next speaker will be Sister Sarah Jamila. And Sarah, I'm actually going to say 5 minutes because the further I get from you, it's hard to signal. So feel free to start now, and I'll tell you. Cool. We got signs. Never mind. All right. Well, thank you so much. Whenever you're ready, Sarah.
Thank you. I begin in the name of God, and I salute you in the traditional Islamic way. Assalamu alaikum. I am Sarah Jamila, and I am happy to talk with you today. And what I want to share is a little history of African American Muslims in Pittsburgh, and then to talk a little bit about some of the discrimination or challenges that we have had over the years. In West Africa, in Ghana to be particular, there's an Adinkra symbol called the Sankofa bird. And this bird has its feet going forward and its head looking back and its tail feathers up in a protective way. And this symbolizes a people moving forward, but always being mindful of their history. Knowing your history is so important that some people say that without history, there can be no future. I am Sarah Jamila, the daughter of Mary Ellen, who was the daughter of Sarah Ebenezer, who was the daughter of Nancy Ashford, who was the daughter of Fatuma, who was taken from northern Nigeria, now called the Cameroon, and enslaved in South Carolina in the Americas. DNA mitochondria verifies this Fulani connection to my family. After surviving the war between the states, the Ku Klux Klan, discrimination, my ancestors fled the atrocities and hostilities of the South and migrated north, looking for better opportunities and jobs and a right to be Muslims, many of them. This was the greatest migration of people that has ever occurred in the United States. The African Americans that left the South between 1900 and 1960, coming north. Some came to the industrialized Pittsburgh area with its smoky air, vacations, and jobs at U.S. Steel and other industries that were here. Here in the Hill District, Pittsburgh had a community of African American Muslims who welcomed their country cousins to the Smoky City, who established themselves in the Hill, the iconic Hill, known simply as the Hill. Sadi Majid was one of the first teachers. I mention him because some think that some of the fringe groups or groups that were kind of Islamic were the teachers and the leaders of the Islamic community in the African American area. That's not true. Sadi Majid was a, quote, Orthodox, and I kind of use that word in relation to Sunni. He was an Orthodox teacher from the Sudan. These people that Sadi sought to educate were regular, working, everyday people who paid their taxes, raised their kids, did charitable jobs. And it was in this particular instance that they were unique. They were unique. In the early 1900s, there were Muslims here who practiced Islam in their homes, had various classrooms at the universities, but First Muslim Mosque was the only place that was chartered, that had a building, that had regular classes. It was unique not only to Pittsburgh, perhaps unique in the country. Minnesota, Detroit, Cedar Rapids, they also had early beginnings, but this beginning in Pittsburgh was indigenous African American Muslims. The first mosque was actually on Wiley Avenue. And to give you a picture of this place, the masjid, First Muslim Mosque, was located about 2 blocks from August Wilson's house, going toward town. Going away from town, about 3 blocks from the ball field where the Homestead Braves and other Negro League baseball players played. It was about 4 blocks from the Crawford Grill, where musicians such as Armstrong and Billie Holiday played. This was a place where, like the 3 rivers, 3 of the Abrahamic faiths came together. Muslims, Jews, and Christians shared this space right around the corner from Teenie Harris's photo shop. This Hill District was a vibrant, diverse community that the Muslim community found solace and refuge in. There also appeared in that particular instance people who wanted to share Islam not only with their immediate neighbors, but with others in the communities. Saadi Majid established his place on Soho Street. Soho Street is right across from Alio Wild School. I often ride past there. It is now an empty lot, thinking about what it must have been like in those days to live in that community. As one, Saadi Majid had come from Sudan, a city called Old Dungalo, and I can imagine how he might have interacted with the Hill District people. So he taught the area Muslims about Islam. He had come to America because he had heard some of the stories, some of the atrocities, lies that were perpetrated about Muslims, who were sometimes portrayed as alligators with big teeth who devoured people. And he was determined to correct some of those misconceptions. And he did a very good job of establishing Islam in this African American community from Islamic, Quran, and Hadith place. They were people who also were very active in community service. Community service to Muslims is tantamount to being a Muslim, to help people in need, to be knowledgeable, to correct incorrections, to validate people's existence and their values. But there were also some problems and discrimination that this community had to work through. And I'm going to give about 4 of those cases. Some of them are personal, others are anecdotal. The first one I will talk about was my own personal experience at the Oliver Bathhouse. I went there to go swimming, and I wore my Muslim garb, which looks like a scuba diving outfit. It's a complete outfit covering. I had my little swim cap on, and a particular guard there said, "Oh no, you can't swim here like that." And it's like, you know, this is how I dress this. And so he said I had to leave. So I left, and then I complained, and so a meeting was set up to discuss this issue. And I was young and naive, and so I got my Quran together where it talked about modesty. And I thought, well, I'll educate these folk about trends and fashions for swimwear. And I brought my pictures from the 1900s where the women were fully covered, and I did all these things. And I came to a room much like this, and there were about 15 people sitting around the table. And I'm looking like, what is this? I thought we were going to have a conversation. And what they said was, well, you might have sores or something under your cover, and we need to know that you're healthy. And so I said, okay, I'll have the doctor write me a note. Didn't do any good. And so I was not allowed to swim. They didn't believe my story. I left and joined a private club. But one thing that was very valuable to me, that experience, when you come to fight, you come to win. And when you come to win, you come with ammunition. And I did not have a lawyer. I did not have the community with me, and I was not prepared to win, and I lost. That never happened again, and it will never happen again to me. Following that incident, there was a girl, Marilyn Pollard. She was a teacher in Pittsburgh Public Schools. She was told that she had to remove her head cover. I gave her the advice that someone should have given me, and she won her case and was reinstated. The other two cases that I want to talk very briefly about, one concerns the headdress for children in Pittsburgh Public Schools. In most schools, they've worked through that, and the Muslims are allowed to wear the garments that are particular to their faith. The last one was about my driver's license. And when I went to get my picture, I sat there, and they said, oh, no, you've got to take off your head cover. We worked through that. So the bottom line is, I think that most of these things, through sensitivity training and education about the culture and sensitivity of people, will help to alleviate some of this distress and challenging situations for Muslims. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah Jamila.
Yeah, thank you, my sister. The next up is Isra Barakat. Ms. Barakat, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here speaking in this remarkable event. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to reveal a lot of things about my story and my experience in the United States. My name is Isra Abdel Muttalib. I'm originally from Iraq, but I lived most of my life in Syria. As an Iraqi citizen, I have tasted the bitterness of life from such a young age. My country, Iraq, has been destroyed by bloodshed, wars, and hate. When I was 5 years old, my family decided to leave Iraq to go to Syria because of the violence there. I was really hoping that I would continue my education in peace, but I was wrong. When I was in 6th grade, the Syrian civil war broke out, bringing terror. My school was attacked by ISIS, and it was closed and reopened many times because of the threats. The situation only got worse as time passed. Thankfully, my mother and I were accepted to the United States, though unfortunately we had to leave behind my brother and father in Syria. They are still trying to come to be with my mother, sister, and I. At the start of my experiences in the United States, it was difficult. I was prepared for the language barrier, but not the discrimination against my religion and race. The ways of human is enigmatic. The reasons for one's good doing or wrongdoing is only known by that one human. But when a man no longer has their own conscience, they believe anything. They lose the ability to question or know logic. ISIS is a parasite among the body of Islam. It drills lies and invalid ideas of the teachings of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. In the Arabic language, jihad is defined as striving and working hard for something. In the Islamic terminology, jihad is divided into two sections. Major jihad, which is known as the spiritual struggle between two powers in ourselves, the soul and the body. The other section of jihad, which is called minor jihad, is the armed struggle. However, that does not automatically mean unjustified use of violence. The minor jihad may be divided into two, aggression and defense. Aggression against any people is not permitted in Islam. However, defense is an absolute right of every individual and nation. Islam has allowed the minor jihad only to defend the Muslim people and their land and to maintain peace in Muslim societies. Allah mentions in the Quran clearly that killing people without any cause is one of the biggest sins in Islam. Allah says, whoever kills a person without any reason of murder or mischief in the earth, it is as though he has killed all the people. And whoever saves a single life, it is as though he has saved all the people. Surah Al-Ma'idah. Permission is granted to those who are fighting because they have been oppressed. Those who have been expelled from their homes without any just cause. Surah Al-Hajj. Fight in the way of God, those who are fighting against you, and do not exceed the limits. Verily, Allah does not love those who exceed the limits. Surah Al-Baqarah. But if they, the enemies, incline to peace, then you also incline to it, and put your trust in Allah. Surah Al-Anfal. The religion of Islam is very peaceful. It demands only kind and beautiful acts. No matter what ISIS does, it will never represent us Muslims who are seeking peace and fleeing our homes just to get away from the bombings, rivers of blood, and the unjustified acts of terror. ISIS, it thrives on the death of innocent people by sinfully interpreting the teachings of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Because of its vile actions in the Middle East, it has caused distress among the rest of the world, and rather than conversing on these issues, some went to wrath and violence towards people of Islam or the people of the Middle East. It wasn't enough that these same people that have to deal with the wrath and violence in other places than the Middle East, they have to deal with worse wrath and violence in their own countries, where ISIS shatters people's aspirations into fragments. When I lived in Syria, they would broadcast the killing of many innocent people, mainly beheading, then the eating of the deceased heart. There were worse things that I had to witness and hear: women being raped, sex slaves, and the indoctrination of children to ISIS. After living in the United States for 4 years, I'm nauseated from the fact that people around the world would involuntarily watch the killings of people of the Middle East online, like a game. I'm irritated because no one is doing anything for the blood flow of innocent children, women, and men of Iraq and Syria. I would like you all to ask yourselves one major question: what can be done to stop the violence? Well, I have the solution. The solution is to keep educating young people, letting them know what's wrong from what's right, teaching them about the correct aspect of Islam, not the wrong ones, teaching them that we all are humans and we're supposed to be different. I used to tell myself that there is no hope in trying to stop the violence around the world because violence creates violence. But if we cut off the root of the violence, it will end the violence. Yet I return to asking myself, who will follow? What is happening in both of my countries, Iraq and Syria, is frightening and heartbreaking. But I can say that hope is the only thing stronger than fear. Just like I defeated this fear, I hope that the children of Syria and Iraq will too, so they can build a better future for the next generations that is only filled with peace and hope. Even small acts count, such as my friend Payson. She created a club after school to build connections between native English speakers and ESL students. They will talk about their experiences and backgrounds, and they will fight discrimination together. Global Minds helped me to make new friendships and to look at the world from different perspectives. So I say that never lose hope. You never know what tomorrow may bring. In the end, I would like to conclude my speech with a quote from Malala: with guns you can kill terrorists, with education you can kill terrorism. Thank you so much for listening to me. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Isra. I really appreciate it. Our final speaker today will be Ishaq Ahmed. Whenever you're ready, Brother Ishaq.
Okay, good morning to all of you, and assalamu alaikum to my Muslim audience. Thank you to the Commission for conducting the hearings. I think it's a great initiative. So CARE is the largest and the most trusted civil rights and advocacy organization working for the American Muslims. It was founded in 1994 and has currently over 30 chapters, including the one in Pittsburgh. Main office is located in Washington, D.C. The vision to become the leading advocate for justice and mutual understanding, and the core mission areas to enhance the understanding of Islam, to encourage dialogue, to protect civil liberties for all, especially for Muslims, to empower American Muslims, to build coalitions that promote justice and mutual understanding. CARE began documenting the anti-Muslim incidents following the 1995 attack on the Murray Federal Building in Oklahoma City, when after the incident, many media outlets started basically blaming the Muslims. Before the terrorists were identified and caught, unsubstantiated news links sparked a wave of anti-Muslim hysteria that resulted in almost 250 incidents of harassment, discrimination, and actual violence against American Muslims, or those perceived to be from Middle East. There were incidents of bias and hatred before 9/11, but the magnitude was not close to what it was after 9/11. Many years after 9/11, the political rhetoric kept the bias against Muslims on the front page. It didn't help that Osama bin Laden would release an audio recording that right before any primary election campaigns would get underway, and I wondered sometime if he was actually a Republican. There was also special registration, some of us remember, where many Muslims who actually were in the country legally, on student visa or business visa, they were, had to go through the registration, and some of them left the country because they, couldn't see a future in this country. In 2016, these are the CARE collected statistics. there were 57% more incidents than in 2015. In 2016, there were 44% more hate crimes than in 2015. See, the hate speech doesn't always stay only as words. It started turning into acts of violence as soon as the hate-filled messages started to fill the airwaves and Twitter. So the surge in anti-Muslim incidents is attributed to the rhetoric in the primary season of the presidential campaigns, as we saw last year. CARE collected these statistics only during the first quarter of this year. And I'm not sure if you can see the picture, but the two pie charts on the top, the one on the left, these were the intakes or the initial complaints that came in the first quarter, almost more than 1,600, collected all the CARE chapters in the nation. And each chapter then analyzes those complaints or incidents and then decide whether there is a bias incident. So out of 1,600, about 850 were considered to be actionable bias incident. And you can see on the picture or the graphs that of 851 bias incidents, 33% were directly related to the immigration executive order or the travel ban. Half of the incidents of total 851, they were instigated by multiple federal agencies, including FBI. 44% of these were attributed to the Custom and Border Protection, again related to the travel ban. There were 65 cases of hate crimes and 87 incidents of harassment reported. The number of hate crimes, 65 in the first quarter alone, is quite alarming. Yet, there has hardly been any condemnation from our elected officials, especially at the national level, especially the president, on these crimes. On the contrary, the messages from the White House has been that American Muslims do not matter. And one example of that attitude is the cancellation of the iftar dinner at the White House that has been a tradition for 20 years. It was started during the time of President Bill Clinton, when Muslim leaders were invited to the White House to break the fast and have dinner, and our current President Trump put an end to that. This next slide basically shows a high-level summary of the type of incidents that were reported by CARE chapters. It does not show the numbers, and more importantly, it does not show the devastation that these incidents have caused to individuals and communities, because that cannot be captured in words. Almost on a daily basis, I and other people who have subscribed to CARE, we receive email alerts and press releases from CARE National on a number of cases that are reported. CARE Pittsburgh chapter has been routinely getting threats. I would say at least twice a year we get mail voice messages. One letter keeps coming from Kansas. I don't know who doesn't like us in Kansas for some reason. There was an incident recently where a Muslim holy book, Quran, was desecrated. This was not in Pittsburgh. These are at national level. And the pages thrown out of the Quran were thrown into a mosque by a passing car. There has been mosques that have been burned and others that have been shot at. There have been a lot of incidents of bullying in school and at work. Observant women wearing hijab are easily identified as Muslims, and they usually bear the brunt of the hatred thrown at our peaceful community. Even our imams, which are the religious leaders, they are not immune from that. Recently, an imam, as he was getting ready to fly back to the United States from his native Kenya, was put on no-fly list. So he was not on the no-fly list when he left. As he was getting ready to come back, he found himself on the no-fly list. And luckily, through CARE's intervention, we were able to get him back. A Florida-based firearms manufacturer recently started issuing promotional buttons that people could wear on their shirts and dresses after they bought their guns. And what does the button say? Real Muslim stoppers. And what does that tell you? You buy our gun, and then you can shoot the Muslims out of this land. And I'm sure you have all heard about the two non-Muslims who gave their lives to protect Muslim teenagers in Oregon. This sad incident sent a chilling message to anyone who would even think of stepping up to help a Muslim who is in trouble. Next slide, please. At the local level, the CARE Pittsburgh has received many complaints, and some of these I have listed on this. In 2015, a Muslim taxi driver was shot after the passenger learned the driver was a Muslim. Luckily, the driver was unhurt. There has been many incidents filed to our local chapter for harassment and discrimination at work. One involved a worker very close to retirement, like one year away from retirement, who requested his supervisor time off to go to the weekly Friday prayer, and even offered that he can, work in another shift or work extra hours. But he instead found that he was almost being fired when CARE stepped in. A Muslim woman, her co-workers called the police because they suspected that she was carrying a bomb. When the police came and cleared her of any wrongdoing, she was obviously very shook up, and the supervisor told her she could go home rest of the day, take off. Next day she found that she was fired because she left her shift before it ended. There has been many incidents of bullying in school over past few years, and many of them involved refugee children. Some of these children were even physically assaulted. I understand that later in the day, hopefully we'll have some refugee children and families will come and testify to the commission. There were some incidents, harassment by police officer. One Muslim driver was actually held overnight, was not given a ticket, was not charged with anything, but just held overnight. And the verbal abuse by the police officers. There has even been some complaints of the Muslim inmates. There has been some harassment over the street. Even one of our board members, CARE board members, she wears the hijab, so obviously everybody could tell she was a Muslim. As she stopped at a red light, the driver in the next car rolled the window down and started shouting at her to go back to her country. And she was so afraid. I asked her, I said, why didn't you call the police? You should have shown her the cell phone that you're calling the police. And she said, this is the route I have to take every day. I was afraid that today I can call the police and tomorrow he may do something worse. So she just kept quiet. And this is, these kind of complaints other people have too. On the next slide, I have a few more examples, but one very interesting example is regarding a law professor who actually filed this incident. A local TV producer contacted that law school looking for an expert on immigration. So obviously this professor was the expert on immigration, a distinguished professor. So his name was given. And the producer came back and specifically asked for white professors. She didn't want him because he had a Muslim name. The current political climate is definitely a contributing factor, since the school bullying and harassment at work and other places is up. And we at CARE are certain that not all incidents are reported. Many Muslims don't know about CARE. Many Muslims don't know about ACLU either. So, they don't know where to go. And some of Muslims, they decide that, they'll take care of the incident themselves or ignore it. And especially in the refugee families, as Isra was mentioning, what these refugees have seen in their own countries, what Isra saw and her family saw in Iraq and Syria, compare that to name calling. Somebody just, bullying you. These things don't mean anything to some of the refugees. So they decide not to act. Now, what is being done? What CARE is doing, right? We talked about all the hatred and all those incidents which are coming our way. But we need to deal with that, right? One way or the other. And CARE does much more than just recording incidents. It is also in the business of improving relations between Muslims and non-Muslim Americans, and to raise awareness about the peaceful nature of the Islamic faith. So one of the things CARE does, it distributes a lot of literature. For example, it has a guide for the journalists so they can understand Islam better, and it gives out so many every year. It also put together training guides for teachers, for healthcare providers, for law enforcement officers, correctional institute, and employers. So they understand, Muslims need time off for prayer, for example, or the women may be wearing hijab. So it kind of, promotes those kind of understanding, and also provides sensitivity training if needed. CARE National has also, published Know Your Rights guides for the Muslims. And recently it launched a mobile phone app to help Muslims understand what their rights are, and also they can file an incident with ease on their phone. CARE National has also filed lawsuits against regulations and laws, including the travel ban, and it also defended individuals who were victims of hate crimes. And on a regular basis, CARE advises the Islamic organizations who find themselves in those situations. At CARE Pittsburgh, we also have defended the victims of hate incidents with help from volunteer attorneys, thanks to ACLU. Our chapter finished a round of Know Your Rights workshops in several mosques this year, and this is the second time we have done that in the past 4 to 5 years. I definitely need to do it more often. We held programs to raise awareness on Islam and Muslims, and also provided speakers to other organizations. Several times in school, when there is a bullying incident, schools are nice enough and realize that, the value of having a Muslim speaker come and talk to the teachers. We have given presentations to retirement communities and community college, panel discussions, workshops, even dinner. Ramadan Iftar dinner was one of them a few weeks ago, and we were honored to have our Commissioner Gerhardt, actually one of the speakers there. So we have been very fortunate. We also actually are asked for interviews at the local TV and media outlets, TV and radio, and also newspapers. And we are among the top 2 Muslim organizations in Pittsburgh, along with the Islamic Center of Pittsburgh, who are contacted by media outlet whenever there is a breaking news concerning Islam and Muslims, so we can, express our opinion and voice. So we have been lucky that we have a strong supporting network from several organizations, and you see some of the names there on the slide. And we need to maintain these relations. We understand the importance of that, and we are looking to establish new ones. So I hope this presentation and presentation by other speaker was helpful in understanding the challenges that American Muslims they face today, and some of the actions we can take to remedy the situation. And on the last slide, just our contact information. These cards are available outside if you would like to know how you can contact CARE chapter, or what we do. But thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much to the Commission.
Thank you so much.
Just quickly in closing, before we open the other segment, I'd like to thank our guest speakers for their overview of religious discrimination today and for your stories. So thank you so much for coming and sharing. We hope to hear from the public about this issue during the public comment portion starting in a few minutes. We will adjourn this section for the public comments part of the day. The next panel will convene after public comment at 1 p.m. Commissioner McMorland will lead the next topic on sanctuary cities.